Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming to this very serious discussion about South County under the flight path. I welcome everybody today to Laguna Niguel City Hall. I want to thank our staff for doing a great job of putting this together. I know there's a big crowd here, and there are some seats still across the hall. And again, I appreciate everybody's patience. If everyone could please rise, and let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you're in uniform, salute. Otherwise, hands over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States, republic for which it stands. Thank you. Again, this is a subject that there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of information, a lot of opinions, and we want to thank Supervisor Bartlett for putting this thing together today and her staff. And again, I want to thank the staff of the City of Laguna Niguel for helping, and my colleagues as well. So the way this is going to work is we're going to have some introductions, little comments, and then we have the cards, the question and comment cards. And if you could fill those out, we'll get to all your questions just a little bit later on. Again, we also have Supervisor Todd Spitzer here as well. I know Congressman Rohrabacher is on his way. So this subject matter is very, very serious. And I want to thank Supervisor Lisa Bartlett of the 5th District for really taking this early on and taking control of the comments that people had and the questions and saying, hey, we need to have a town hall meeting. So here it is, today. And again, if need be, we will do whatever it takes to make sure everybody, has their concerns addressed. But with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Supervisor Lisa Bartlett of the 5th District, who really is the champion behind this program here tonight. Supervisor Bartlett.
Thank you, Mayor Slusewitz. And once again, many thanks for allowing us to use this amazing venue, your council chambers and your community room for our meeting tonight. I see a number of friends in the audience, and I've had the opportunity to meet many of you. However, I haven't had the privilege yet of meeting everyone. So I'm Lisa Bartlett, Supervisor for the 5th District, and happy to be here this evening. This is a topic that's really near and dear to all of us. I'd like to first start by thanking each and every one of you who's taken time out of your busy schedule to be here tonight. We've all got busy lives and things to do, but the airplane noise is something that is really picking up as far as flights, and it's come to everyone's attention that we really need to try to address this issue, and that's why we're having the public forum. It's my hope that when we leave here today, everyone has a better understanding of what is going on related to the aircraft flight paths, including changes you may be experiencing, the FAA's Metroplex project, and what you can do to ensure your comments and concerns are heard by those who have the ability to affect change. Before we get too far along, I'd also like to introduce a number of local dignitaries who are in the audience tonight. This might be a little unusual since we have 2 rooms tonight, but let's give it a shot. So as I say your name, please stand and wave your hand and be recognized. We have Don Froelich, President of the Molten Niguel Water District. Amy Walker from Congressman Darrell Issa's office. Ann Figueroa from Assemblyman Bill Bro's office. Barry Rondinella, our John Wayne Airport Director. Eric Wiegand from Senator Pat Bates' office. Mark Monin from from El Toro Water District. John Mark Jennings, Laguna Niguel City Council. Fred Minigar, Laguna Niguel Mayor Pro Tem. Rod Foster, Laguna Niguel City Manager. Okay. And we have Kathleen Stanton, District Director for Dana Rohrabacher's office. Congressman Rohrabacher. Thank you. Okay. Is there any other local elected official that I missed at this time? No one? Okay. So thank you to all of our elected officials for attending tonight's event and for your outstanding commitment to our communities. I want to make mention of the question and comment cards. Toward the end of the program, we'll have a Q&A session, and we'll have any of the presenters available there to answer your questions. So grab one of the yellow cards, fill it out, or fill out more than one if you have more than one question, and hand that in to our staff. Mary and my other staff members are collecting the cards. We're here tonight to discuss an important topic that has been of interest to many South Coast residents, the aircraft flight paths and the FAA's SoCal Metroplex project. So first and foremost, to all of those who have contacted me regarding aircraft noise and other impacts, I've definitely heard your concerns. We've had more than just a few phone calls and emails into our board office, so we know that the community is very much aware of what's going on, they're engaged, and they want action to be taken. I scheduled this forum because it was necessary to ensure that the community is aware of what exactly is taking place and to provide a way to get factual information and have an opportunity to get questions or answers to your questions. There seems to be a lot of misinformation or misperception of the issue, and many people know that something is changing or has changed, but tonight hopefully will answer a lot of your questions. Tonight you'll hear from a number of presenters on the various aspects of flight paths, their impacts, and other issues related to Metroplex. The presentations will be from me, Supervisor Spitzer, and John Wayne Airport staff. It's also worth noting that NextGen and SoCal Metroplex are Federal Aviation Administration projects. Also, only the FAA and the pilots in command of an aircraft have jurisdiction over flight paths. So given that many concerns relayed to me pertain to perceived impacts of NextGen and SoCal Metroplex, I invited the FAA Regional Administrator and members of his staff to be present tonight. But of course, they were not available tonight. So who better to provide information on NextGen and its impacts on communities than the agency whose project it is? But as I stated, they weren't able to make it. They stated that since a number of public meetings had been held prior to the time of implementation, it was unnecessary to attend another community event on the issue. Additionally, they are no longer in their administrative phase, as they are now in the implementation phase of this project. As I stated, NextGen and SoCal Metroplex are entirely federal projects under the FAA, and we sincerely wish they could have been here to answer questions from the audience. But I was in Washington, D.C. a few weeks ago and meeting with FAA staff and had an outstanding meeting. So I think we are going to make some progress, and I'll talk a little bit about that later in the presentation. While the county and John Wayne Airport are not the FAA, and there are things that we cannot fully address, we will do our best to provide the best information possible. Over the course of the last few months, I've heard from many of you on this topic. Some individuals send the county an email every time an airplane flies over their home, so we've received a number of emails, or about an increase in the consistency and number of flights overhead, or complaints about the pollution from the airplanes. While I don't have any authority or jurisdiction over the FAA or aircrafts in flight, I have shared much information on this topic to those who need to know, and included a number of articles in my weekly newsletter. I've also been meeting with constituents on the topic and speaking at other public engagements in addition to my trip to Washington, D.C. As such, I recently met with Marlene, Steve, Michelle, and Jackie from the No Planes group to discuss their various concerns and issues, and they've really got a lot of good information that was very well documented, and we appreciate that. We had a productive discussion, and were able to talk through a number of their issues and how they could best utilize their grassroots effort to ensure their concerns are being directed in the right place. Many of you who have lived here a while may still remember the long and divisive battle South County waged against the El Toro Airport. Some of you were instrumental in that successful airport and are even here tonight, including one of my predecessors, former 5th District Supervisor Tom Wilson. I don't know if Tom's here or in the community room. Tom. Thank you, Tom. And I'd also like to introduce Todd Spitzer, who will be speaking shortly, my colleague. He was very much involved in the El Toro Airport issue as well as my community relations advisor, Sergio Prince, who's in the back there. Okay. In addition, today we also have Jean Felder from Laguna Beach, Paul Williams from Laguna Niguel, and Connie Sanchez from Laguna Beach, who are also instrumental in the El Toro Airport issue. And there were also invaluable efforts of those who were unable to attend tonight's forum, including Colonel Bill Kogerman, former Assemblywoman and now Senator Pat Bates, and the organization that fought the El Toro Airport, Tristan Krogius of the No Jets at El Toro, as well as the creator of eltoroairport.org website, Mr. Len Krasner. And let's not forget the heroic efforts of the anti-airport champions who've also passed away, including Denny Harris, Jim Davey, Virginia Kincaid, as well as the Honorable Joe Brown and Richard Dixon, among others. The El Toro Airport fight was about preserving and protecting our quality of life in South County. It was an extremely divisive time for our county's history, pitting South County cities against North County cities, including the Newport Beach area. Had it not been for the tireless efforts of people that I just acknowledged and thousands more just like them, South County would look very different than it does today. The aircraft overflight concerns we are addressing today, while seemingly similar to the El Toro fight, have glaring differences. Back then, we were fighting the County of Orange, the pro-airport supervisors, as well as the city of Newport Beach. Today, the County of Orange, the Board of Supervisors, as well as the cities in both North and South County are all united in their opposition to impacts of airport overflights due to FAA's project. As a result, the county filed a lawsuit against FAA, as have the cities of Laguna Beach and Newport Beach, and we will be working with one another through the litigation project as things move forward. Also want to welcome my Chief of Staff, Paul Walters. Okay. Please be assured that we are on your side, and we will continue to fight and protect the wonderful quality of life that we have here in South County that we've come to love and enjoy, and that's indeed why most of us moved here. As your county supervisor, I want to assure you that I will continue to hear your concerns and always advocate on your behalf. Just 2 weeks ago, I did make the trek to Washington, D.C., and the FAA was on my checklist for meetings. I'll give you an update later about the results of the meeting. We also have Carrie Ferguson from San Juan Capistrano City Council. Welcome. I specifically engaged each member of our congressional delegation on the Metroplex issue, as well as with staff from the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure Subcommittee on Aviation, in addition to the FAA, because this has to be addressed at the federal level, FAA in Washington, D.C., and also with our people in Congress. If we want any changes made, getting in contact with our congressional members, Congressman Dana Rohrabacher, Congressman Darrell Issa, Congressman Mimi Walters, and any other people in Congress that you know. We really need to focus on getting our attention in DC to have some implemented changes. I shared with them many of the concerns I've heard from residents like you and made sure that Orange County is engaged. We had a number of very successful meetings, and as I indicated, I'll discuss that a little bit later. At this time, I'd like to introduce my colleague on the Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Todd Spitzer. While my district includes the flight paths eastbound for eastbound departures, his district, which is the 3rd district, comprises those on the arrival corridor. So we have the departure side, and he's got the arrival side in his district. So at this time, please welcome Supervisor Todd Spitzer.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Bartlett. Okay, so I'm looking out at this audience tonight, and I recognize a lot of people from 20 years ago, right? There's a lot of people, and raise your hand if you were involved in stopping El Toro, all right? So I want to thank you for that, because as Supervisor Bartlett indicated, we did everything in our power to stop that airport. And when he was introduced, I didn't think he got the applause that he deserved, because this man made sure that El Toro was not going to be an international airport. Stand up, Tom Wilson, and get the proper recognition you deserve. You know, I got elected the first time to the Board of Supervisors in 1996 and joined Tom, who was by himself fighting that airport. And we turned that board from a 4-to-1 board to a 3-to-2 board. But what was one of the lessons we learned in that fight? Never give up and always get the right information so you could make the right decisions. And what people need to understand is look around this room and the overflow room, because there's probably close to, I don't know, maybe 500 people between the two rooms. And when this gets reported, that's very important, because what Supervisor Bartlett told you, and it's fantastic that she and her staff organized this and that we're here tonight, is people have to know that we are not going to tolerate a change in our quality of life. We understood how John Wayne Airport was going to operate, but we're going to hold them to those flight patterns. And if anything changes, we're going to do what we did unanimously on the board. We're going to sue the FAA, because at the end of the day, these agencies only understand one thing, and that is who is fighting. And so Sergio Prince was introduced, and Sergio, everybody knows Sergio Prince. I met Sergio when we were fighting the airport the first time. And he and a lot of people, you know, there's a past mayors who are on that wall, and there are people who Lisa read who have moved on. They're maybe arguably in obviously a much better place. But there's some real heroes that made sure that we protected our quality of life. Now, I have the arrival corridor. I live in East Orange, and the flights are lower and they're more noisy, and I'm experiencing at my house a change in flight behavior. And there are people all over South County who have also shared with us they are seeing a change in flight behavior. And what I believe is that what we're observing is what's happening. And you know, in this business of aviation, they will tell us all kinds of things and hope that we'll either ignore it, not pay attention, or move on with our lives. That's exactly why we don't have an international airport at El Toro, because we refuse to accept that, because we're an active community, we care deeply, and as a result of our coalition and our cohesiveness, we have been able to sustain and to fight on. And Eric Wygand's here from Senator Pat Bates' office, and he has been involved in this also as a staff member for a long time. Eric, thank you for being here. And so we have fought. And so I am really proud of the fact that we are unanimous in our resolve to sue the FAA. And I want you to understand what we want to accomplish. We want to accomplish that the way that aviation was conducted in our county prior to the Metroplex implementation is something we understand we can live with. Newport Beach, look, when Tom and I were on the board, it was very difficult, as Lisa indicated, because our county was split. But one of our greatest friends and allies in this fight is the city of Newport Beach and the city of Laguna Beach. And if you lived in those communities, and we argued a long time about this 20 years ago, if you lived in those communities on the departure corridor from John Wayne, you would be angry too. You would not want that in your community, and they deserve to be protected, to have those flights take off, go over the ocean, get far enough out over the ocean and high enough before they turn back in. That protects Corona Del Mar, it protects Newport Coast, and it protects Laguna Niguel and Laguna Hills and Laguna Woods and San Juan Capistrano and San Clemente, because they'll be high enough in the air as they were before. But my belief is that because of this new system, this GPS system, where they can fly safer now because they know their exact location, they're flying lower to save fuel and save time. And I'm not going to tolerate, and I know Supervisor Bartlett will not as well, we are not going to tolerate time savings and fuel savings at the cost of our communities. That's inappropriate. And we can all operate together. We can operate with an excellent airport. Barry Rodinella is here. He's our executive director of John Wayne Airport. He and his staff can operate that airport, and we can continue to serve our constituents and all the people that want to come to Orange County from all over the world, quite frankly. But we can do it in a way that respects our communities. And that's all we're asking for. We understand operating an airport. Thank goodness for the curfew. That is a very, very important thing for our county. But we are not going to jeopardize our quality of life. So your turnout here tonight is so important, because the FAA wasn't too busy. The FAA hasn't already done this so many times. They just thought this wouldn't be helpful or resourceful. They're not here for one reason. They don't want to sit here and have to look at all of you. That's just the plain truth. But they will hear and understand, and it will be reported back, your resolve. Okay? Because we're not going to, we have never, ever, ever sat by and let people do things like this to our community. So if the evidence shows and the data shows that we are being impacted, then we're going to fight that in district court in Washington, D.C., which By the way, there was a venue change. We filed our lawsuit here, and they moved it to Washington, D.C. So what does that tell you about how much the FAA wants to argue in our backyard? They don't. So we'll be there with all our lawyers and all the force, and we will continue to fight until we get the flight patterns that this county has grown accustomed and that we can live. And anything else is completely unacceptable. So I appreciate you so much being here tonight. Thank you so much.
Right, thank you, Supervisor Spitzer. As you can tell, we're engaged in this at the board level at the county, and we will be out there definitely making a difference. And as Supervisor Spitzer mentioned, the fix is so easy. Because of the next gen plan, all the planes have to do is when they take off, they need to get up to altitude. They've got that steep takeoff, get up to altitude, go out over the ocean, and then turn once they're at altitude. And that way, when they come back over land, it's not a problem. They're up at 20,000 feet or 18,000 feet. But they're getting out of the airport now, and they're getting what they call an early turn. So if you get an early turn, that could potentially save fuel, save time. But when you get an early turn, you're going out over the ocean, you're turning and you're banking early, which means you're coming back over land at a lower altitude. And so that is what's causing the problem. So also want to introduce, we have Greg Routs from Mission Viejo City Council. Okay. And Alan Songstad, former mayor of the city of Laguna Hills. Back there. And we have Councilmember Ross Chun from city of Aliso Viejo, somewhere back there. Thank you, Ross. Okay. So without further ado, I'd like to now introduce our next presenters from John Wayne Airport. We have Deputy Airport Director Eric Freed and Nicholas Gaskins from the John Wayne Airport Noise and Access Office. So, gentlemen, please come up. They'll be providing a bit more technical information as well as information on the amazing and publicly available VOLENS flight tracking system. So please join me in welcoming them up to the podium. Gentlemen.
Okay, well, thank you, Supervisor. So Nick and I are here tonight. Our goal basically is to go over for you the role and responsibility and the authority of John Wayne Airport, go over the background of the Next Gen and the Metroplex initiatives, understanding that there's probably varying levels of knowledge of those programs here tonight. Also go over some of the resources that we have available to you through the flight tracking system. Okay. And then also we want to go over some of the pre and post Metroplex flight tracks that we have seen and some of the analysis that we've done in our office over that. So some of the areas that we'll obviously see that you've experienced as far as more concentration and some of the less dispersion that we've seen. Okay, so part of what's already been covered here is that the airport is owned and operated by the County of Orange. So when we are one of the most highly regulated airports in the nation, if not perhaps the world. And that's basically because of the terms of the agreements that we have. We've got a mandatory curfew, limits on our operations, passengers, and noise levels. And the regulations are very specific for our airport. And we understand that, and it can't really go beyond that authority. And that's where the authority ends, is just what we have in our agreement. And it's really the FAA that has exclusive control over the navigable airspace. So that includes altitudes and locations of aircraft. And the county itself has no authority to regulate aircraft flight paths. So our current regulatory structure, most unique aspect of the airport is basically our settlement agreement. And There's 4 signatories for that agreement. It's the County of Orange, the City of Newport Beach, and 2 community groups. The settlement agreement is exactly what it sounds like it is. It's settlement to litigation that started back in the mid-1980s when the airport went through trying to add some additional airport facilities. The agreement also reflects a balance between the need for air travel in the county and certainty on the community standpoint of what they can expect as far as the size of our operations. Some of the current concerns started back in 1990 at the federal level. The FAA saw that we had this agreement, and there was concerns by them that there would be some patchwork quilt across the country. And so they enacted at that time a law that was called the Airport Noise and Capacity Act of 1990. So we were fortunate to get grandfathered into that law, so that's good. It provides protections for this county, so that we've got a guaranteed number of operations, passengers, and noise limits that will be abided by. But the unfortunate part about that is that this law, although we were grandfathered in, we're stuck with what we have from the standpoint that we cannot have any additional or more restrictive regulations put on, or else that will be in conflict with that law. So this is a map of the noise monitoring stations that we have. We've got 10 noise monitoring stations that we have regulatory limits that are established at those. And only those locations are what we can enforce. So any attempt to add additional locations or make noise monitoring levels more restrictive, again, that would also come in conflict with the ANCA law. So Congress directed FAA to prepare for the future of the airspace in our nation based on what they call the Next Generation Air Transportation System, or NextGen. So in the cornerstone, basically, it was to transition from land-based to satellite-based technology. We've all seen, we've all heard stories that these procedures, the equipment are decades old, and although safe, it's inefficient, so it was time to redo that. Part of the goals that FAA has listed for this program are repeatable and predictable flight tracks. So those are 2 very key words, repeatable and predictable, and that's basically what we're starting to see more of from the standpoint that we're seeing more concentration of flight tracks. We're seeing less dispersion than there's been in the past. More precision, more automation is what FAA is saying. Part of their goals too, early on, actually part of Congress's goals to FAA was also to reduce noise and emissions. But that's one area where we have not seen much of anything said, especially when it was in there. There was nothing mentioned in their EA, and that was part of what the county's comments were. So FAA has chosen to implement NextGen on a regional level rather than an airport by airport procedure. So basically, it's called Metroplex, which we've all heard that term before, most of us, hopefully, at this point. And it's based on geographic areas, and there's 21 of them across the United States. John Wayne Airport just happens to be in the Southern California Metroplex project, which is the second, probably most complicated airspace in the United States. The other airports included in that area are Burbank, LAX, Ontario, Long Beach, San Diego, and Palm Springs are all part of the Southern California Metroplex. So procedures that are being implemented are beyond just John Wayne. So the The County of Orange plays two key roles in this process as we see it. As the airport owner and operator, we're interested in the safe and efficient operation of the aircraft that operate out of our airport and represent communities who are potentially impacted by the Metroplex process. So we also were very interested in reviewing the proposals that the FAA came out with, starting with the draft EA that was issued in June of 2015. The airport, not having airspace experience, what we did is we went out and hired a consultant who did to help us frame up the issues that were in there, go through the 1,800 some odd pages that were part of that draft EA, and to help us frame together what the county put together as far as our comments, which was a 6-page letter that laid out all the areas of concern that the county had that they wanted to communicate to the FAA, as well as all the flaws that we identified in the analysis that the FAA did. And then in return for that, the FAA's response to our comments was basically a polite but non-committal letter back. So at this point, I want to turn it over to my colleague Nick Gaskins, and he's going to walk through some of the implementation dates, some of the resources that we have available to you.
Thank you, Eric. Good evening. Alrighty. As Eric mentioned, I'm Nick Gaskins. I'm the Access and Noise Manager for John Wayne Airport. My portion of the presentation, I am going to just give you a little background on the actual procedures that were implemented on March 2nd and April 27th. The analysis that we have later on in the presentation is taking into consideration the March 2nd procedures. One may wonder how a procedure gets its name. We've often asked that question and they just say it's a 5-letter combination that they select. So Piggin had replaced the Strel departure. Historically, Strel did depart, went out over the ocean and turned over South County. Hero and Fins are what Channel and Muscle were. The Channel and Muscle departure, they took off, went to the northwest, so they'd make a right turn after they passed the coastline. So the only procedure that we're looking at right here for South County, where there you would see some aircraft activity, would be the Piggin, and also the Ruby 1, which is reverse flow. So reverse flow takes place when typically it's Santa Ana's, or it could just be any type of weather that occurs. Winds aloft at a higher altitude, may not be windy down here, maybe windy 10,000, 15,000 feet high. So that's less than 5% of our operations annually. So we don't see the Ruby procedure that often. What I do want to touch base on is John Wayne Airport's flight track viewer, also known as Volans, as Supervisor Bartlett had mentioned early on in the presentation. Very sophisticated program. There are quite a few airports in the country that do utilize Volans. Basically, you can log in at any time. It's Java-based. We are currently in the process of upgrading the system to an HTML version. It will be mobile capable, so you'll be able to view it on your app, or I'm sorry, on your cell phone. View flights in 3D, provides altitude, airline, flight tracks, pilot perspective. You can do historical, or you can do near real time. We say near real time. It's actually delayed 60 minutes. The reason being, first, security, and B, it's going to be, we allow that extra 60 minutes in case there's any glitches in the radar that's coming through to our system. We want to make sure that we allow time before it becomes public that all of the information is input. I know that members of the community have been utilizing some other apps such as FlightAware, Flight Radar 24, and I believe Plane Finder. those are great websites to go to. We use FlightAware when we're tracking times, when there's an arrival time of an aircraft, a departure time. It's good for wheels up when the aircraft gets airborne or lands. As far as flight tracking for noise abatement purposes, community concerns, I would highly recommend and encourage you to utilize Volans. The design of it, the radar itself. The difference between the radar in Volans versus FlightAware, Flight Radar 24, and Plane Finder, we have what they call ASDX. It's surface level radar. It collects a lot of the information that comes in regarding the aircraft type, speed, altitude, things of that sort. Flight Radar 24, FlightAware, and those other sites, they use ADS-B. It's a different type of radar. Not all aircraft are ADS-B equipped. When you don't have an aircraft that has that capability, you don't get the information. I have some examples that I want to show you. Well, first I'm going to show you how to get there. So we're going to go, I don't know if you got one of these flyers. Supervisor Bartlett's office had created this flyer with John Wayne Airport. It's very useful. On one side, it instructs you to go to ocr.com, and you'll see, I keep referencing up there, but I'm sorry. You see the button in the bottom center? It's the John Wayne Flight Track Viewer. If you click that, it will take you to the Volans webpage for John Wayne Airport. The first part of the webpage is going to be basic information on requirements. Again, it's Java-based now, and we've had a few issues. You have to do your Java updates on your computer. We are moving towards the new HTML version, which we're really excited about. And if you want to take a look at it, I encourage you to visit SFO, San Francisco Airport's Volans webpage. It'll be identical. It'll just be John Wayne Airport. So if you go to the second part, it's basic information on how to use the system. That's how you get there. So this is Volans. The amount of things, of features that it has, I mean, it's like a video game to me. I mean, you could do 3D, you could do pilot's perspective, you can go back in time historically. Again, the 60-minute delay due to security and accuracy. If you look at the runway alignment of that track right there, it's a Southwest Flight 47 on May 3rd, departing at about 10:10. You notice the alignment is right off of the center line of the runway, as well as the departing aircraft at the approach end of the runway. The fact that it's on the runway, the alignment, very detailed accuracy there. Now we're going to go visit FlightAware. Southwest Flight 47 on May 3rd at 10:10 a.m. The start of the track is right at the 73 and the 55 freeway. John Wayne Airport is the green dot. You can see the inaccuracies with the data there. Flight Radar 24, same type of situation. Zigzag, segmented flight tracks. Accuracy. John Wayne's Volans system will give you a very detailed description of the area that it overflies. And Plane Finder, there was no Southwest 47. So you can see the level of accuracy between the different sites. So I encourage you to utilize the Volans system. So next, I am going to go into the pre versus post Metroplex analysis. Before I go into the next slide, I'm just going to give a brief description of what you'll see. It's for a 1 month period in March of 2016, and we'll then look at the same period in March of 2017. It's all John Wayne Airport commercial activity. It'll all be one color. The pre will be in orange, and the post will be in blue. So I'm going to try to use this. Oh, it's working good. It's March 3rd, 2016 through April 2nd. All commercial traffic going into and out of John Wayne Airport. If you look down in South County, you see more, or I'm sorry, general dispersion back in 2016. You still see the historical flight path that we're seeing post. The area over here to the west of the airport where you see Seal Beach, those procedures haven't been implemented as of when this data was collected because the channel muscle, which converted to the fins in Hero, went into effect on April 27th. The next slide is going to be post. You look down here, we notice less dispersion over these areas in South County, more of a tightening, concentrated path that was indicated or mentioned by the FAA at one point. So the next slide is really going to provide a good visual. It's going to be an overlay of the two flight tracks, or two maps. So what we saw historically in 2016, a majority of it was orange coverage. We're seeing less dispersion in 2017, as well as on the approach. You see a tightening of the path. Again, this area to the west, the new procedures hadn't been implemented at this time, or I'm sorry, at the time of the analysis. And with that, I am going to hand it over to Supervisor Bartlett.
Thank you very much, Eric and Nick, for your insightful presentation. I'm going to zip through the next couple of slides. We want to have a full hour for our Q&A. So I just want to thank our airport staff for their presentation. And as you know, we have litigation that's currently in progress along with the cities of Newport Beach and Laguna Beach. The environmental impact analysis they did, we felt was not accurate. I mean, they had over 4,000 comments, and regardless of those concerns, they still implemented the plan. And they stated that there was no finding of significant impact and that their record of decision was based on what they felt were no environmental impacts to this area. So at this point, there is no clear timeline of when the case will be adjudicated, but we'll continue to keep all of you posted. So the first step is to track the flights, and as Nick and Eric stated, the Volan software is the best way to do it. Go on the website, download the software. Soon we'll have a mobile app available, then you can actually use it on your iPhones and such. That's the best way to get the most accurate information. It's important to get information that includes the aircraft tail number, the airline, the altitude, the location, and the origin and the destination, because all of that information is really important to be able to report in so that we can start tracking specifically those specific flights that are going right over your homes so that we can keep track of that information. There is a slight delay on the time that's presented when you track the software with the Volan software. And the reason for that is there are safety concerns. You know, we as residents are tracking the flights, but who knows, there could be terrorists out there that are tracking our flights too. And we don't want them to pinpoint the exact time they're over a specific location. So that's why the reason for a little bit of the delay there. So there are a couple of options on what you can do. First course, and the quickest way to ensure your voice is heard, is to reach out to FAA by telephone and file your complaint. You've got a couple of choices there. You can contact the FAA Long Beach Flight Standards District Office at 562-420-1755 to file your complaint, and again, give all that information that they need for that particular flight. Additionally, you can reach out to the FAA in Washington, D.C. via phone by calling the FAA's Aviation Noise Ombudsman at 202-267-3521. And we also have their address available on the slide as well. You can also send a letter to the FAA Regional Administrator for the Western Pacific region in Los Angeles. That would be the famous Dennis Roberts, who declined to be here tonight. But you can also reach out to his office and try to get a response. I traveled to Washington, D.C., met with a number of members of our congressional delegation, including Congressman Rohrabacher, who will come up and speak in just a few moments, along with representatives Congressman Darrell Issa and Congresswoman Mimi Walters. So if you want to reach out to our congressional representatives, we request that you contact them via their offices in Washington, D.C. We were told that that's the best and easiest way and quickest way to actually get correspondence to our federal legislators. Now, when I went to Washington, D.C., I did meet with FAA representatives. I met with the Director for Airport Planning and Programming, the Deputy Associate Administrator for Airports, and the Vice President for the Air Traffic Organization Mission Support Services. And I expressed a lot of the concerns that we've been hearing from our communities here in South County about the Metroplex plan. And we talked about, it's not just the traffic coming out of John Wayne Airport on the departures, but some of the aircraft, and this was really interesting, the FAA gave us some data that there is some of that cross traffic that we're experiencing as well. So we're getting cross traffic from San Diego, Long Beach, Los Angeles, and also from the private aircraft. Some of the larger big jets like the Gulfstream 6s and the Lear jets and such, they come as well, and they're very noisy. But I had a really successful discussion with the FAA, and one of the things that came out of our discussion, I said, you've got to be able to control getting the flights going up to altitude before they turn and come back in over land. It's just that simple. And I said, how do we do that? And they said, well, you know, we'll take a look at the flight data. One thing we can do, this all starts with the air traffic controller. So the FAA controls the air traffic controller. And I said, can the air traffic controller basically, can you give them directions that indicates they cannot allow for an aircraft taking off from John Wayne Airport requesting an early turn unless it's for safety purposes? And they said, you know, we can probably do that. That would be a huge difference for all of us, because right now those planes are taking off, the pilots are just requesting early turn, and when they do that, they're turning and coming over land at a lower altitude. So this would be huge if we can get the FAA to basically mandate to the air traffic controllers, look, pilots are going to request early turn, they may want to save time, they may want to save fuel, do not allow the early turn unless it's for a safety purpose. So that means that they would have to take off, get up out to altitude, get out over the ocean at a higher altitude, and then come back over land. So the fix to this whole problem is actually very simple, but it's a matter of keeping vocal. They need to know that we're really serious down here in South County. We're not going to just stand here and take it day after day. They have to do something to help us. Thank you. You know, and we're going to put them to task. The FAA is the governing body here. Through the legal action and through our input from the residents and from the County of Orange through the Board of Supervisors, we're going to make it really clear that we expect some change. And we need to stay engaged, and we need to continue to contact the legislators, contact the FAA. They've got to hear from every single one of you so they know that we're serious, we're coming out en masse, and we definitely want to change in the flight takeoffs out of John Wayne Airport. So another thing you can do, each quarter, our John Wayne Airport Access and Noise Office, you probably didn't know we had one of those, holds a quarterly meeting concerning noise impacts. So these meetings are held on the second Wednesday of the last month of the quarter at 2 p.m. They're held in the Eddie Martin Administration Building at John Wayne Airport, and I encourage all of you to attend. This is another way to get information into a forum that's focused on noise. So at each of the quarterly meetings, John Wayne Airport staff, they provide insight and review of the monthly airport stats and the quarterly noise reports. They also share and discuss new topics and emerging concerns. To further enhance the experience, they often bring special guests or speakers to provide additional information on the various topics. Additionally, at the end of the meeting, there is an open forum where anyone from the public can address the group and concerns about noise. So the next quarterly noise and access meeting is coming up in a little less than a month. It'll take place on June the 14th, and I hope that all of you can attend. You can also get more information on the access and noise page on ocair.com, or you can call my board office and we can give you that information. So as we move forward, I want to have you continue to share your concerns with our office. We log in every single call, every single email that comes in. So we keep track of everybody out there in the community, who's contacting us, from what cities, from what unincorporated areas, how many times they've called, how many emails we have. I mean, we have a stack of correspondence at this point, but keep those emails coming in, keep those phone calls coming in, because we want to know day in and day out what you're experiencing. That will help us better get poised for dealing with the FAA in Washington, D.C. to make those significant changes that we want to take place. So at this point, we're going to start the question and answer portion of the meeting. So do we have some cards here? Great. Okay. Do we only have one? Oh, we have 2 microphones. Okay, good. Before we get started, though, very kind for Congressman Rohrabacher to join us. I'd like to bring up the Congressman. He was very helpful when I met with him in Washington, D.C. about wanting to address our issues. Congressman. But before you speak, we also have more VIPs in attendance. We have Sherry Horn, the mayor of Laguna Woods, and we have Martha McNicholas, president of CUSD Board of Trustees, and Tony Eisman, the mayor of Laguna Beach. Welcome. Okay, without further ado, Congressman Rohrabacher.
This is not a new issue. I remember when my father was a Marine pilot at El Toro. It was an issue back then, and it's been an issue ever since, and it's important that a balance be struck between all the players, including the players who are listening on the ground, including the players who fly in the airplanes, whether they were at that time military or whether they are people now who are going off to do business in various parts of the world, or having their grandchildren fly into John Wayne so they can visit their grandparents. Aviation has been a wondrous thing for our economy and a wondrous thing for our way of life. But there are downsides to every good thing. We know that. And so what we have to do is work together to strike the balance. A balance that is fair, a balance that will not diminish the ability of aviation to provide us with the services that make our life meaningful, and visiting elsewhere, and also the economic fact. However, let us note that there was a big change in the way aviation was managed just recently, and that's what we just heard our lecture on, is how it's changed. Now, before it was all ground-based, a ground-based system, and we now have a satellite system and computer-controlled aviation. And they did that, apparently, and by the way, I voted for that. I voted to make sure we upgraded our ability to make these type of decisions and to make our system more efficient. However, let us note that what apparently has happened is that the new system placed a very high priority on reducing fuel usage by the airlines and reducing the time over given areas so that you could then have more volume. So there was volume and fuel reduction were major factors, and reduction of noise and emissions were not major factors in that particular investigation or that particular plan. Let us note that's up to us now to try to work with this and mold. We don't want to go back to the old system. We want a satellite system, and we want a system of controls that is the best in the world and the most effective. but it's up to us now to mold this in a way that is the most beneficial to everybody involved, and as I say, striking a balance. We just heard, and I'm very, very pleased that the supervisor has taken, Lisa has taken a personal effort in this, and she is a dynamo for going out there and facing all these people in Washington. So, there is, what she outlined is a solution that we need to, or an answer that we need to put on the table, and she will make sure it's on the table. I'll make sure it's on the table, and that is, why not an early? Why are these people getting this early turn? Why is anyone given an early turn? If that means more noise over us, why is that? To save fuel? I'm sorry, when you run an airlines, part of the expense is being concerned about the people under the airlines. So that's a very poignant example of the remolding that we've got to do. I also feel that we've got to make sure that noise and health are part of the study of how we're going to run our system. Noise and health are factors. They're not the only factors, but they are significant factors that need to be addressed. And finally, let me just say that in terms of the actual noise, I live in Costa Mesa. I live right near the Back Bay. You see I have these hearing aids. Of course, I can take out the hearing aids, but that obviously isn't the solution. But the fact is that I have an incredible amount of noise that I put up with, and I bought the house knowing that was what it was. And so at this point, I don't really feel compelled to try to stop them because it was there before I got there. But with that said, we need to make sure that if there's ways to deal with that to make it better, and also to make sure that part of this whole study is going to be whether or not there is some health factor in being under airports, okay? And there's going to be a study dealing with this. And I'm going to be looking very closely at that. I have a daughter who had leukemia, a young daughter, and who knows whether or not that has anything to do with what pollution is around or whether it's just genetic. We'll find out. But we do need to know if there are any health risks dealing with the airports and being under airports, and how we can, again, deal with that and mold to eliminate that as a factor. I have sent a letter. I have been involved in this for many years now. And again, I've tried to keep a balanced approach. And the last thing I would say is that Lisa came up with something that's very important, which is, why are we saying they can make those turns quicker at all? You know, why is anybody getting a waiver and not having to go all the way out and then come back? Especially if that means that they're coming into lower altitude with more noise. I just would suggest we also look at, and I have already sent a letter to the FAA demanding to know why we can't just have the planes flying out at a further distance, just further distance, and then turning around and coming back, because they have to come back. They can't go all the way over Japan and Russia and all the way back to the New York or wherever they're going. No, but they should be able to fly. Why can't they fly out a little bit further? And then when they come back, obviously they will be able to come back at a little higher altitude. So the demand that I've made is for the FAA to explain to me why that isn't possible. If it isn't possible, if it is possible, why aren't we doing it? And so I've demanded that in writing from them, and I expect to hear from them soon. So with that, I'm happy to get together with Lisa. Thank you for your leadership on this, and we're working together.
Thank you, Congressman Rohrabacher. Okay, keep those cards coming in. So as the congressman stated, the solution is very simple, and we are going to definitely take action. We're all pro-business, and the airlines are a business, and they want to save money, they want to save on fuel, they want to save time. And while we can appreciate that, we're not going to allow them to save fuel and time at our expense. It is just not worth it. Our quality of life is too important to all of us. Okay, so let's start with some questions. We'll have the microphone that we can hand off to everyone up here. Let's see, first question. To raise a complaint to FAA, they require aircraft tail number. Does Volans give that data besides aircraft type, airline flight, etc.? So this will be directed to John Wayne Airport.
Can you hear me? Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry. Yes, you can obtain that information on Volans. It will give you the airline and the flight number, which should be enough for the FAA. If it's a general aviation flight, private aircraft, as Supervisor Bartlett mentioned, the Lears, the Gulfstreams, 95% of the time there will be a tail number. If there's a GA flight number that's flying what we call visual flight rules, they put in their information as 1200, and I'm probably getting too technical here, but those aircraft will not show a tail number. Those are typically aircraft that are just doing pattern work right near the airport. General aviation, sorry.
Okay, next question. What is the legal basis for our lawsuit? So County of Orange versus FAA. Todd, you want to take this one?
So anytime you're doing a big project like this, you have to do an environmental impact report. So I think it was in one of the slides, the FAA did this entire study for the whole country and said there's no substantial environmental impact report. I may have the exact buzzword. I think no substantial, no significant impact, which on its face, something this dramatic, right, across the whole nation, that is completely counterintuitive. It just doesn't make any logical sense. So the lawsuit is saying that the EIR is flawed and that you have to study these changes. Now, let's understand something about this lawsuit. They could be doing this today. Let's say, for example, their argument is, and they convince a court, that they're not flying outside of the parameters that have been studied. What's to prevent them in the future from going outside of it once we all go back and we become complacent and say, oh, well, you know, that's what they assured us. That's why we want a settlement agreement, just like Newport Beach. Newport Beach was not stupid years ago, right, when they were fighting to make sure that there were departure protocols in place. They got those locked in as part of a consent decree. So anytime there was anybody who might stray from that in subsequent years, they could run back to court and they could enforce that consent decree. That's what we have to achieve, is an understanding that this is what you're saying you're doing, and we're going to lock you into that. So we can go back in perpetuity during the term of this plan and have some enforceable rights. And that's what we need to achieve. So that is another aspect of the lawsuit, not just fighting the fact that the EIR is inadequate, but also getting terms in a consent decree that become enforceable in subsequent years.
Okay, next question. Seeing that this is a federal issue, did you invite federal officials? What was their response? Yes, we did invite them, and yes, they said no. This was FAA in Los Angeles. They declined to attend tonight. But FAA in Washington, D.C., when we met with them, they are also going to be pulling the flight data information from, I believe it's Virginia. They have a database there that they can extract all the data from. So they're going to be able to correlate that with what we're experiencing here as well. Okay. Why do aircraft cut the corner and turn early and not follow the FAA designated flight path?
So early turns, as they're referenced here, are a result of FAA required separation and or pilot request to reduce time, save fuel. I will say that there are times when ATC will have them turn early. It may not be a spacing issue that's occurring within the vicinity of South County or even Orange County. It could be an issue of spacing out towards thermal, towards the California-Arizona border. And they have to ensure that the spacing of the aircraft, the sequencing is correct to prevent any issues that may arise further on down the road. It's a domino effect. So those are the two main reasons that would occur.
Except spacing makes no sense because what you've got is the standard operating procedure that's not being followed. And if there's a spacing problem, that means the whole system is screwed up in some way. So the bottom line is the only reason they're really turning is because they want to get done with the flight a little earlier, get the passengers there a little earlier, save a little fuel. After all, I got to meet my wife at the restaurant, and it would be good if I could get into wherever they're going an extra half an hour early or something. That's probably more likely than spacing. Otherwise, there's a real problem with the whole calculated system, right? Okay.
I think this one was from everyone in attendance. Why is the airplane flight path designed so that they fly over my residence? So, if you can explain, so John Wayne Airport, if you can explain the Metroplex with the 3 mile radius, width, and now with Metroplex, it's narrow. It's a little more narrow. So I think that's why a lot of the residents are feeling that impact on the noise.
As mentioned before, with the Metroplex procedures going to satellite-based GPS, they're following almost like a track in the sky. You're going to see more concentrated areas of activity. Historically, the aircraft did depart on the Strel and fly over parts of South County. And we are seeing that with the Piggin 1 departure. If you've noticed a change or something different, it's more than likely an increase in concentration, the tightening of I call it the track. So that may be what the frequency that you're seeing or experiencing, I'm sorry.
Will the county's lawsuit against the FAA end the Metroplex procedures? No, unfortunately not. But John Wayne Airport staff, why don't you expound on that?
I have something written down here. The lawsuits filed by the cities of Newport Beach, Laguna Beach, and the county of Orange maintain that the FAA's environmental assessment was inadequate. If these lawsuits are successful, it would not necessarily mean a change in the flight paths. The main goal of the county's lawsuit is to make sure that flight paths do not extend into or change to impact areas where they have not been before.
Okay, next question. What can the county do to change flight paths back to what they were before Metroplex?
The authority is within the FAA, as we all know. Communities can express their concerns. Supervisor Bartlett, Supervisor Spitzer, they provided great contact information tonight as far as who we should reach out to. So I encourage you that if you have those concerns, you do reach out to your elected officials, to the FAA. The card that was provided to you, it does provide the FAA's contact number, email, also our contact information, the Access and Noise Office. But with that said, the FAA has the authority to make those changes.
Next question. What is the minimum altitude over the coastline allowed for a commercial flight?
That I do not have the exact altitude, but I could get that information and provide it to you at a later date.
Okay. Next question. Have the altitudes changed for VFR flyers? Is there any way to change the rules?
For VFR, visual flight rules.
Right, so this must be for private aircraft.
I'm unaware, but again, I can research that and get back to you on that one.
For the previous question about what's the altitude minimum for general aviation, it's 1,000 feet. For again, that's small aircraft and things like that, or your Lear jets and jet streams and Gulfstreams and things like that. It's only 1,000 feet above the elevation. I was at the FAA last week with some staff, and that's what they told us. Now, those aren't for your jumbo jets, but that's for your general aviation.
We know that Supervisors Bartlett and Spitzer have met with legislators in DC. Who are they and what have they committed to do to solve this problem of noise from low-flying planes? Supervisor Spitzer, you want to take that one first? So what we're committed to do is basically tell the FAA, look, we need some relief here with the airplane noise. The solution is so simple. Do not allow early turns. You need to dictate to the air traffic controllers no early turns except for safety purposes. That way they take off, they get out of the airport up to altitude, they go out over the ocean, get it to an appropriate altitude, then bank, turn back in, and then it doesn't matter whether they're flying over Laguna Beach, Newport Beach, Corona del Mar, San Juan Capistrano, or Dana Point, because no matter what they do at that point, they're going to be high enough in altitude where they're not going to impact any of our residents. So the solution is so very simple, and we're going to work with the FAA to make sure that they commit to that. So they are willing to listen to us. They're pulling their flight data. We're going to compare it with ours, and then we're going to sit back down and work through these issues. But that's what we're committed to do. So just to let you know, we'll be continuing to work with everyone at the FAA. Okay, thanks. John Wayne Airport, how is the Piggin 1 changing to Piggin 2 implementing August 16th? What specifically are the changes?
I don't know if it's pigeon or piggin. I get that. I get both, but I call it piggin. We just recently discussed the Piggin 1 to the Piggin 2, and if with the Strel departure, there was a Strel 1, a Strel 2, 3, and 4 up until last year. Going from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, it could be anything from just a text change. Where, for instance, the Piggin 1, I believe it says climb and maintain 13,000. With the Piggin 2, something along the lines of just up to 13. So it's to reduce, it's not a change in the actual procedure, it's to reduce, and the purpose of going from 1 to 2 is to reduce communication between ATC. The more communication you have, the more air you have. It's a safety concern. So they're going from 1 to 2. Anytime they make a minor change, they have to issue out a new departure name. So that's why they're going Piggin 1 to Piggin 2 within a 6-month period, I think. So.
Okay. Next question. The John Wayne representative showed something of noise monitors, and it seemed that they were all in the Newport and Corona del Mar area. Do we have noise monitors in South County? If so, where are they? And if we don't have any, why not? And if we don't, how can we have the same something in South County? Who wrote this?
Okay, I think I understand.
Jody Vaughn. Where's Jody? She must be in the overflow room.
I think I understand the question.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's true. The noise monitors that we have are 10. That's what that slide showed, 3 on arrival and 7 on departure. Those were the noise monitors for regulatory purposes that were set back in the 1970s. Those were the ones that we had noise limits associated with. And then when I was going over the slide that talked about the Airport Noise and Capacity Act, and that we couldn't be any more restrictive or add any locations where there's regulatory monitors, it would be a conflict with that law. So there's just there's no practical purpose for putting in another regulatory noise monitor if you can't actually use it to enforce any of the rules.
Okay. Now this is regarding small planes.
By the way, I don't get that. You get that? I mean, yeah, the law says we can't pay any attention to some information if we get accurate information. Give me a break. I mean, what's that all about? I'm sorry. Tell me what law it is, then we'll change the damn law, okay? If the law is preventing you from even considering more data and more input, well, then we should change that law. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, anyway, that's, pardon me for interrupting there.
Regarding small planes, how is this changed with Next Gen? A small plane woke this person up yesterday at 6:38 in the morning.
Again, I met with the FAA with staff last week, and again, the Next Gen does not affect general aviation at all. So any of the small planes that are not airline-driven planes are not affected by Next Gen. And again, according to the FAA, from what they told myself and staff, is 1,000 feet if you have 3 miles visibility above ground, and you can turn as many times and circle as many times and do whatever it is you want to do over any neighborhoods. And that's just been the rule of law since the Wright brothers. So.
And these two questions sort of go together. Realistically, what chance do we have to get the flight paths of Next Gen changed? And then can we please explain what is the early turn rationale for safety reasons? What are the limitations and how do we prevent abuse of this request?
Can you repeat the first question? Because I kind of zoned in on the early
realistically, what chance do we have to get the flight paths of Next Gen changed?
I can't answer that. I think that like we mentioned earlier, lies within the FAA. Community concerns being expressed through our elected officials, as mentioned. In regards to the early turns, safety concerns, it could be where an aircraft departs, they have some sort of emergency, they have to turn early, they can't gain certain altitude. There's a multitude of reasons that an early turn may occur due to safety reasons. I'm not an air traffic controller. I can't give you that detail. So, again, it could be the speed of the aircraft. Just think of a domino effect. One thing occurs, it can affect a slew of different things within a day. Take it, for instance, delays in flights. If you have one delay, a whole day of flights for an airline can be disrupted. It's the same thing with air traffic control.
Okay.
Look, about flight paths, just to be real frank, you change flight path from here, you're going to go over somebody else, right? This idea that, oh, we'll just, the Newport Beach shoved it off on us and we're going to shove it back on somebody else. No, there's not going to, arguing about where the flight paths are is going to get nobody anywhere. If we're going to, but we have to deal with the noise, deal with some of the issues that we've been tracking up. I will have to tell you that I do not believe that the turns that we've been talking about have much to do with safety. I will be willing to bet that it has everything to do with just discretion, that some people are choosing to get someplace a little earlier, and these are ordinary people who have ordinary lives, and if they got a chance to take 15 minutes, get there 15 minutes earlier, that's what they're going to do. And unless we tell them they can't. And certainly no one is complaining that if someone has to take an early turn for safety reasons, no one in here, raise your hand if you're going to complain that the noise that they had to make an early turn was because of safety reasons, and you're opposed to that. Nobody in here is opposed to that. What we're opposed is turns that are just based on discretion, that has nothing to do with safety. And my guess is, and again, that needs to be studied. There are things, what we need to do is have a situation where the new system needs to be looked at with specifically these questions in mind. And I've got one question out to the FAA. I'll include several of these others. Answer me to this: how many of these have you found, these early turns been found to safety reasons? And I'm just betting that you'll find that most of them are personal decisions and not safety reasons.
Yes, well, and I don't think it's so much changing the flight paths, because we're sort of, to some extent, stuck with what we have with Metroplex and Next Gen. But that being said, if we just have them not have the early turns, get up to altitude over the ocean before they turn back onto land, then it doesn't matter where they come back. They can come back under the Metroplex and Next Gen plan, and it's not going to impact any of our residences. So the key thing is the air traffic controllers have to be mandated by the FAA. No early turns unless it's for safety. So if they just go out, over the ocean where they should go up to altitude, then they can come back anywhere and it won't impact us. So the solution to this is very, very simple, and we just have to keep pounding that into the FAA until they understand what we're talking about, and we get some relief there. Okay, next question. I understand the problem with the departures. However, does Next Gen create problems with the landing/approach patterns? Okay.
Find out how many early turns there are. I was the excuse given. I'm going to say we were just discussing early turns here, and how many we want to find out exactly how many early turns are happening, and then we'll find out exactly how many early turns there are and how many of them are justified.
Yes, the speakers are over, the mics are live, so why don't we go over on this side with questions. So Mayor Eisman, you want to start?
Yeah. First, I want to thank Lisa for doing this. This is so important. And I think what's so interesting is there are a lot of people here that wouldn't have come to a meeting a year ago because you didn't have a problem a year ago. And we have had a problem in Laguna Beach for 10 years, so I've been at this a long time. And what I found out is the FAA, I promise you, will say, nothing has changed. And it makes you crazy because you know something has changed. We had an incredible outcry from the residents of Laguna Canyon because when Stroll came in, they went exactly the same pattern all the time, and so they got it all the time. Well, that kind of changed. But the reality is we are exactly at the right place to solve this problem, and what's been said before is true. Very few places in the country can solve this problem except for us on the ocean. All they have to do is fly over the ocean. However, the FAA answers to no one but the aircraft industry. That's who they try to please. And so no matter what we do, there's a big engine on the other side that tells them what they want. The FAA is trying to privatize air traffic controllers, and then they'd really have a lot more control over what they do. The question of environmental impact is, because Laguna's altitude just goes there, the geology, we go straight up. There are people up at top of the hill that come very close to those planes, and they can actually say they can see people in the windows. So, but what they also see on their cars and on their fences and on their sidewalks is a very fine particulate matter. Kerosene is what is in the air. And if you can see it on the car, but you can't see it in your lungs. And so there are two ways, I think, of approaching this. There's the approach of, you don't have to make this noise because your altitude can be very high. And what is it, a minute more that they fly out and they've got the altitude? But more importantly, I think we've got an environmental approach to fighting this. But Phoenix had an issue. All of a sudden, they changed the flight pattern and they flew over some very fancy people, and in the old part of Phoenix, and John McCain fixed it. So there are ways to get the attention of the FAA. I don't know how we do it in Orange County.
Well, that's why our federal legislators are very important. Congressman Rohrabacher, Congressman Issa, Congressman Walters, they can help us in Washington, D.C. But when you talk about the airline industry, they have a pretty strong lobby. But the airlines aren't exactly in the good graces of the public right now, dragging people off of airplanes. And I would be willing to say that if they don't cooperate as a group, we can certainly put our money where our mouth is and just say, you know what? If United or Southwest or whatever the airline isn't going to help us and they're still requesting early turns and they're getting granted, well, we're just not going to fly them anymore. There are plenty of options for airplanes these days on flights. So, we can basically use our pocketbook to make a point. And our votes, yes. Have there been any studies done on how much fuel and time will actually be saved with these early turns? So has there been a calculation by the airlines or by the airport?
Well, John Wayne Airport certainly hasn't done that. And I'm sure there's lots of studies out there. We're just not aware of the particulars on what exactly the fuel savings is. I just don't have that data.
Lisa?
Yes. Oh, yes. Councilmember Raths, Mission Viejo.
Greg Raths from Mission Viejo. I'm a former commercial airline pilot, and we get paid for the time we're in the air. So the last thing we want to do is to cut a corner and lose some money. When you get paid, when you get paid $200-300 an hour, that 10 minutes is like $60. That pays for dinner. So my take on this is it's the ATC and the FAA controllers. They want to turn you early to get you out of their airspace, just to get you out of the way. So and also, I think they're in cahoots with the airlines because then they have to pay the pilots less, they have to pay the flight attendants less, and they use less fuel. So we rather, when you hear pilots say, we're going to hurry up to get you there because we're a little late, well, they really don't. Because you get paid while you're in the air. So what I'm saying is I believe this is an FAA rule, and somehow they're in cahoots with the airlines. It's not the pilots or the flight attendants.
Thank you. Okay,
And can I say one other thing?
Certainly.
I was also flew 25 years out of El Toro flying jet fighters, and we used to call that the sound of freedom, all that noise we made. So unfortunately, we're not there anymore.
All right,
Thank
next
you.
question. If the Valance software is 60 minutes delay, how does it help monitor noise?
One way of utilizing it is you'd have to take note of the time that the aircraft passed over. Just as if there was a 10-minute delay, you'd have to remember that it flew over at 7:40 rather than 7:30 or 7:50. We provide that delay for those two reasons, security and accuracy. And the 10-minute delay that you're seeing from FlightAware, Flight Radar 24, and Plane Finder, which I know a lot of the community members are using, that 10-minute delay is evident in the data that's being presented.
Okay. Sure.
So I don't know if you remember in the El Toro days, we insisted on a flight demonstration. Remember that? And that changed public opinion because we had been told all kinds of things about how aircraft were going to operate, but until we actually did the test, no one really had any hard evidence of that. Which, after the flight demonstration, right, what would happen in Laguna Niguel and Laguna Hills and all the approach corridors to runway 34? Well, runway 7, in those days, that pointed towards Foothill Ranch. And so the county commissioned temporary noise monitors. And Tom remembers this. Vince Mestry, I don't know if he still does that, but Mestry Greavy was the big name in noise monitoring. And you can put temporary noise monitors out in the community and you can test the hypothesis. So what I would suggest is when we get, that Lisa and I go back and direct John Wayne Airport staff, and we bring this to the board, to hire a firm like a Vince Mestry to do the temporary noise monitors all throughout these areas to really collect the actual noise data. Because when we go to court, we have to present evidence, right? We have to, the reason we're collecting all your data is it's not anecdotal. We're using that because we want to present evidence about the fact that the EIR is flawed. And we have a former judge here from the Superior Court who I used to appear. It's good to see you, sir. And so he's going to say, well, what evidence do you have, right? You can't just make argument. So one of the things I think that's missing is that we don't have noise data. So we can hire the firms to do the temporary noise monitors, and Mr. Rodinella, we can ask him, direct him to report back to us, and we can ask him, and he can already start looking at it, because I think it's a good idea. Let's put some of these noise monitors underneath the flight paths that you are suspecting are coming from John Wayne, and then the staff can then corroborate that as against the flight data, and we can see what actual noise is being generated by those flights. So, Barry, I'm asking you to look into that. He's taking notes, and he'll report back to the board, and maybe we can do a noise study for Orange County.
Okay, and these next two questions are sort of similar. No one has addressed new overnight planes approaching LAX or Long Beach. This is new traffic not experienced under Metroplex. And the next question is, the noise problem is not only from departures and arrivals, but by the flyovers. Can anything be done to alleviate that? So I think they're talking about, the cross traffic that we're experiencing, San Diego, LAX, and Long Beach. And, those airports allow for planes to come in and land and take off at hours that are outside of our scope from the 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. that we have at John Wayne Airport. So what can we do with regard to our South County residents here that are experiencing impacts from the cross traffic from other airports? What's the best thing for us to do with regard to contacting the FAA and getting some relief with regard to the cross traffic?
Well, I think it's collection of data for sure. We haven't looked at too much data on the cross traffic that Supervisor Bartlett was referring to. A lot of that is what's going down along the coastline is LAX traffic that's coming from Mexico and South America. And I think that much of that traffic was there 2-3 years ago too. Well, okay, that's a fair question. And the best way to do that is to go onto the flight tracking system and look at it. We can also run tracks for you if there, whatever request you want to make for cross traffic for LAX. Let us know dates and times, and we can run that through the system and pull up some data on that.
Again, on the cross traffic, again, we had a visit with the FAA last week, and there are these little commuter jets. A lot of them are prop planes as well that fly San Diego to LAX, and they're 5,000 to 6,000 feet. That's max elevations, maybe 7,000, and they fly right over the middle of Laguna Niguel. And those apparently were there before. That's what they claim, although they weren't able to demonstrate that to us while we were there. And once again, unless we could get the whole system changed, they basically told us that it was there before and it's going to remain there. But these are flying day and night. These are the little puddle jumpers, but they're not over the puddle. They're right over, for example, those residents of Laguna Niguel, they're right over the middle of our town.
Councilmember Ferguson.
I think I've got, there it is. Carrie Ferguson from San Juan Capistrano. Is there a way to direct some of that north-south traffic over the puddle? I'm asking.
Again, and that's the FAA is going to make that determination. We certainly can't
Exactly,
as
but
the
is there a
airport.
way for them to do it if they wanted to?
The Southern California Metroplex area, it's a very complicated system. I mean, there's lots of cross traffic, so there's only so much movement you can do. Everybody can't be as high as you want them to be, honestly.
Well, I'm just saying having them be more westerly.
Over the water more.
In other words,
Yeah.
over the water.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's
I'm just
certainly a
asking.
request that could be made to the FAA. I mean, they're the only ones that can make that change.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, next question. Does the Volan software show the altitude over Laguna Niguel?
Yes, it does. And the new system will also show that. If you click on the actual aircraft icon, which it'll show it in its livery, so you'll see the Southwest livery, American livery. You can click on it, a little ring will appear around the aircraft, and it'll provide you that information. Also in the bottom right corner, it'll have the altitude, it'll have the airport it's arriving to and departing from. Going forward with the new upgrade, and like I said earlier, I encourage you to visit SFO's Volan system because we will mirror theirs. So there will be some changes. It's going to be more user-friendly, personally. Like I said, the system that we have, it provides so many different features. Do I think that they're a must? I don't know, but I think the system that we're going to will be a lot easier to use. Great for your cell phones or your iPads, Android pads, whatever you use. So yeah, it's a great system. And if SFO is using it, some other airports are using it, I highly encourage you. And it's the same data that we analyze in office in our ANOM system, our Airport Noise and Operations Management System. It's the same data set. So what we're looking at, our staff in the Access to Noise office, and what you're looking at is going to be identical.
Can I add, when these airplanes are going from San Diego to LAX, they're at cruise power, even though they're at 6,000, 7,000 feet, which is a lot less noise. The noise you're all hearing is the guys coming out of John Wayne because they're at full power as they're heading over the power. Oh, well, never mind.
Scrap that. Yeah, it's a variety of things. It's the departures with the early turns. It's the cross traffic. So we're going to have to figure out with FAA, and we're going to have to get all that cross traffic data, because even if we solve the early turn issue out of John Wayne Airport, we still have to deal with that cross traffic for San Diego, Long Beach, and LAX. So we'll be working with the FAA to gather that data as well, and then figure out what we can do. So we do not have any more questions, but I just want to thank Mayor Slusewitz and the Laguna Niguel City Council and the city staff for hosting us. Thank you. And thank you to Supervisor Spitzer for joining me as well. And thank you to Eric Freed and Nick Gaskins from John Wayne Airport. So continue to stay engaged. Thank you for attending tonight. Everybody's got their marching orders on the software, the Volan software. Contact your congressman. Oh, and thank you, Congressman Rohrabacher, as well. Sure. Yeah, we can do that.